guys, tonight I'm going to be talking about adjustment disorder. This is something that I've been diagnosed with myself, and that's why I felt it important to discuss. Now, I'm reading from Psychology Today. It says adjustment disorder is an abnormal and excessive reaction to an identifiable life stressor. So that right there means that it's something that we can note as a stressor, from marriage or divorce or adopting a new baby, having a new baby, the loss of a loved one, new job, losing your job, things like this. That they're not all necessarily bad, but they do have stress involved with them, new responsibilities or scary responsibilities in some cases, like the divorce or the losing a job or losing a loved one. That can get scary. Now the rest of it is the reaction is more severe than would normally be expected and can result in significant impairment in social, occupational, and academic functioning. So basically, to me, that's saying that you know what's required of you, but unfortunately you're unable to fulfill it because you're going through this. And I'll read the symptoms here in a minute. But what it says about symptoms is that symptoms must arise within 3 months of the onset of the stressor and last no longer than 6 months after the stressor has ended. Now, the symptoms are depressed mood, impaired occupational or social functioning, agitation, trembling or twitching, physical complaints. In other words, something like headaches, stomach aches. It says here chest pain and general aches and pains. The next symptom is palpitations. And there's conduct disturbances. In other words, truancy, vandalism, reckless driving, or fighting. The next symptom is withdrawal. And then lastly, it finishes with anxiety, worry, stress, and tension. Now, those are all symptoms that can tie into other disorders. So it specifically states here, note, symptoms may vary widely. The person may or may not be aware of the stressor causing the disturbance. So, you could be getting a new job and starting a new chapter of your life and, be excited about it, but still kind of tip the scales and kind of overreact a little bit. And that's what causes the attention of your GP or your psychiatrist or your therapist or whomever is going to be diagnosing you with this. But it also says that the response may be linked to a single event, like a flood or fire, marriage, divorce, starting school, a new job, things that I had mentioned, or multiple events, marital problems or severe business difficulties is what it suggests here. Stressors may be recurrent events, a child witnessing parents constantly fighting, chemotherapy, financial difficulties. So it goes even further in depth with these different possibilities of stressors. It also says, or continuous stressors like living in a crime-ridden neighborhood. This says here that adjustment disorder often occurs with one or more of the following, which goes back to the symptoms. And it's basically saying maladaptive reactions are involved in this too. Problems related to work, school, physical complaints, social isolation. They're usually associated with high risk of suicide and suicidal behavior, substance abuse, and the prolongation of other medical disorders or interference with their treatments. Adjustment disorder that persists may progress to become a more severe mental disorder, such as major depressive disorder. And what I can say about that is, as someone that has disorders that are linked to anxiety and depression, 2 of the symptoms on the list, it takes longer sometimes to receive a diagnosis because you have symptoms that can kind of overlap with these other disorders. And so it can take time and it can be difficult, but the one big thing about adjustment disorder is that these symptoms last no longer than 6 months. So if you are engaging in any of these symptoms or feeling any of these symptoms past 6 months, you might have a different disorder at that point. Or rather, you never had adjustment disorder in the first place, but are developing or dealing with a different disorder altogether. So what I can say is, for me, personally, I believe that adjustment disorder is a fair diagnosis because the onset happened when I lost my aunt. I hadn't spoken with her in a few years because of her addiction. I set certain parameters to my being willing to be a part of her life and allowing her into my life that she never met. But when she passed away, I was in denial about it. I didn't want to face it. I didn't want to admit that it was real. I didn't know how to admit that it was real. And I struggled for about 6 months. And then the same thing happened when my grandmother passed away. Well, she passed away shortly after my aunt, so they kind of commingle. But the same thing happened again when my mother passed away. I was in denial for 6 months, even though I helped write her eulogy. I helped plan her mass. I helped my father pick out her burial plot. Like, I knew all of these concrete reasons of, you know, your mom's really gone. But in the back of my mind, I just couldn't accept it. And I engaged in reckless behavior and was having general aches and pains and an increase in headaches. And I was definitely agitated and depressed. I had social issues. I wasn't able to communicate my thoughts very clearly. And I was seen as, you know, troubled or troublesome by some people that, you know, in my community that were willing to speak up and bring this to light. But it's also, I feel the same sort of issues and symptoms as when a pet dies, or when I lose a job, or even sometimes when I get a new job, it's a stressor because it's all of that unknown and the anxiety that it stirs up. And then it's like, for the first 6 months of having the new job, I'm on pins and needles, and I'm a little reckless, and I'm trying to figure out how to make a name for myself but not get fired. So adjustment disorder is a very straightforward disorder, and the symptoms arise within 3 months of the stressor, and they're gone within 6 months of the stressor. So it's pretty straightforward. It's a short-lasting disorder, but every time there's a big stressor, or even for some people, from some of the stuff I've read, even little stressors can cause these sort of reactions that are a little over the top and extreme to other people. So that's adjustment disorder, and I think that a lot of what it says as far as causes, it says again all of these things about issues around sexuality, families or parents' mail order problems, school problems, financial problems. All of it comes to something that causes some sort of stress response, but it's just a little over the top. It's a little bit more than normal. And the primary treatment is to help that person achieve a level of functioning comparable to that prior to the stressful event. So for me, with the loss of my mom or my grandma or my aunt or my best friend or any of my animals, it was making sure that I got back on track and going to therapy and talking about my grief and making sure that I didn't just stay focused and stuck in my own head about what had happened and what I had lost, and letting myself go down a rabbit hole of just negative emotion and being consumed by it. It does suggest therapy, and realistic short-term goals should be made at the start of therapy, as the course of adjustment disorder is short-term in nature. So that's a good thing, that it is short in nature. And that means that it can be addressed fairly easily in therapy. It also says to avoid stressors. It's kind of difficult when you're living a life of an adult and you have responsibilities and you lose people and you have to work to provide for yourself and all these things. So it's kind of hard, but at the same time, in this instance, like right now, I'm stressed because I'm going through a couple of things emotionally and financially. But what I'm doing is I'm taking a step back and asking for less hours at work, so I'm not as exhausted all the time. Now, and I love my job, so this is a hard thing to do, but it helps limit the stressors. I've cut certain people out of my life that were toxic or that made me feel inadequate and like I was constantly being judged, or that I had to do something to make them feel special all the time, and that's just exhausting. So I'm limiting my interactions with people, making sure that they're healthy, making sure that they're beneficial to both parties and not just the other person. I've set a couple of bills up on auto pay so that way I don't have to think about it. That helps limit some of my financial stress and the worrying about the budget every month or every week. And that's what it says, is to limit stressors. And again, this is from Psychology Today. It also says that family therapy is effective, especially with coping and communication skills, especially for people with younger children that are dealing with adjustment disorder. Most people recover from adjustment disorder without any remaining symptoms if they have no previous history of mental illness and have access to stable social support. Individuals suffering from adjustment disorder should work to develop and maintain a healthy diet and sleep patterns, as well as a strong social support system. Now, for me, a support system is kind of hard to maintain because where I live right now, I don't have as many friends as I did back where I call home. I could do things there year round, whereas here it kind of is limited to about 3/4 of the year I can do whatever I want, but then there's times where I can't, so I end up with seasonal depression during the winter. Something completely different, probably a video I'll do this winter. But that is adjustment disorder in a very quick run through. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. Let me know. I'll be more than happy to answer any of the questions that you have, or if there's a discussion that you want to have, please feel free. And I look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Bye.